Landlords. There is another side to this coin. Hey everyone, Red Rebel Jeff Jones here, and in this video I want to talk about landlords, specifically small landlords. Why they shouldn't be generally lumped with big landlords, and why many of them are getting out of the rental market, why they're leaving. Now before I get into it, please like and share this video to give it a boost, and subscribe to the channel if you like the content that I make. Now also, I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not trying to minimise any bad experiences people have had with small landlords. I'm just trying to give a different point of view to things. So when I talk about small and big landlords, what do I mean? Well, a small landlord is a landlord that rents out only one or two properties, while a big landlord rents out a good number of them. Now I'm going to focus specifically here on the perspective of small landlords, as I do have some secondary experience in that part of the rental market. I'll go into a little bit more detail on that. Now before I get into that kind of detail and my experience with it, it's important to talk about what a landlord actually is. A landlord is a property investor. A landlord is an investor, like a stock investor, who has decided to invest in property instead of stocks. Their goals is the same as any other kind of investor: make more money out of their investment. The only difference is that property investing is more personal, because you have tenants, real people with real lives with real problems. But that doesn't change the fact that a landlord is an investor. You need to keep that in mind and consider what a landlord would be thinking when making a decision about their rented property. My experience with this is a secondary experience. I don't rent a property directly. I do help someone who does. A family member of mine is a small landlord. They rent out one property, which was inherited to her. She's not good with computers, so I help her with the computer side of things, which is how I've kind of learned a lot about this. She's actually in the process of taking the property off of the rental market, so one of our kids can move into it, but also partly because she finds the rental market just way too stressful. Now the tenant that she has in now has been a really good tenant. She's been there for a good few years now. She pays the rent on time, keeps the place well clean, and is good at communicating when there's any maintenance or issues that arise. So why are small landlords leaving the rental market? Because they're leaving in droves. Here's a few reasons that the RTB, the Residential Tenancies Board, found when they surveyed landlords that have left. Some of the reasons are they no longer wished to be a landlord, being a landlord was not profitable, the property was no longer in negative equity, there's too much time needed in managing properties, problem tenants are too much hassle, they were retiring and their property was their pension, the tax was too high on rental income, they were worried about a fall in property value, property had increased in value significantly, planned to reinvest in another property, the regulatory environment for landlords, and other. Now I won't go into the other part, but all of them, and it's usually more than one of these, is the reason why landlords leave. Now I want to talk about some of the reasons why particular reasons why small landlords especially get killed. And it's why kind of property is becoming less and less of an attractive investment. So first off, rent pressure zones. Now, what is that? A rent pressure zone is a designated area of the country where rents cannot be increased more than the general rate of inflation, or they can't be increased by more than 2% where inflation is higher than that. Essentially, it's rent control, but only for certain areas. Now I'm going to go through like a rough scenario here so you guys can see where the issue is. Say the gross rent on a property is 1,000. So rent is 1,000. Inflation is 4%. So the inflation increase needed would be around €40. So 1,040 would be the needed increase to keep the property making the same amount of money with the same value. But if it's in a rent pressure zone, they can only increase it by 2%, which means the max rent increase would be €20, which would bring it up to €1,020. So while the return growth has actually decreased by 2%, despite the fact that they've increased the rent, because the actual value of the rent has decreased because of inflation. The second reason is taxation. There are a lot of taxes, but there's three main taxes that nail small landlords: income tax, PRSI, and the universal social charge. 40% is the income tax, 4% for PRSI, and 4.5% for USC, which adds up to 48.5%. Go back to that scenario. Of that €1,000 rent, about 485 of that is taken away in taxes. So small landlords lose almost half the money that they earn from rent just through taxes, while corporate landlords don't pay any of that. They pay corporation tax, which is about 25%. That hardly seems fair. Another reason is current regulations. The rental market is seriously overregulated. From health and safety standards to registration regulations, landlords must comply with an increasing number of rules and regulations year after year. The cost of maintenance and compliance it is increasing every year, which further eats into that income that they get from the rent. So it makes it less profitable. Now this will get worse if Sinn Féin get into power. If Sinn get into power in the next election, which is actually looking really likely at the moment, the overregulation of the rental market is going to get a lot worse. A lot worse. According to the Sinn Féin spokesperson for housing, they plan to legislate for tenancies of indefinite duration, which would see the party remove the sale of property as grounds for issuing a notice to quit under Section 34 of the Residential Tenancies Act. Many landlords are actually selling now, believing that they won't be able to sell it later on, or that it'll be just ridiculously harder to do in the future, which is a fair enough response, I think. Last is the Residential Tenancies Board. I have a serious issue with these guys. The Residential Tenancies Board is a public body set up to support and develop a well-functioning rental housing sector. Not doing a great job. The role of the RTB is to regulate the rental sector, provide information and research to inform policy on the sector, maintain a national register of tenancies, resolve disputes between tenants and landlords, and provide information to the public to ensure tenancies run smoothly and no issues arise. The RTB is advertised as impartial in the exercise of its duties, but it has a serious history of favouring tenants over landlords in most disputes, even if the landlord is clearly in the right. And I've heard many horror stories demonstrating this. Actually, one horror story that is coming to mind now. A friend of mine who has been a landlord for a good while now, they have a 2-bed property. And they had the property heavily damaged by a tenant. I think it was something like 7,000 or 8,000 euros worth of damage done. Went to the RTB, and the RTB offered compensation of, I think it was like 500 or 600 quid to compensate for the damage. That wasn't going to repair it. But it gets worse. The RTB actually made no effort to chase the actual tenant for the money from them. So the landlord didn't even get that 500-600 quid. I had to pay for the repair of the damages through his own money. There's a lot of horror stories like that, by the way. The RTB is not fit for purpose. It's essentially, I think, become like an activist group for tenants. Even though they're supposed to be a regulatory body working with the government. That has not ended well, and it won't end well. So what do you guys think? Share your thoughts with me in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear them. And like this video and subscribe to the channel if you like the content that I make. The Irish rental market is a complete shambles right now, and it doesn't look like it's going to improve anytime soon. Irish society treats all landlords as the villain of this story. It's not that simple. It's not black and white. It never is. Small landlords have many understandable reasons for wanting to get out of the market, for wanting to bail. I think that's only going to get worse. I think there's a few things that needs to happen. First off, rent pressure zones, get rid of them. They don't make sense. It's rent control never works. Everywhere it's been tried, it's made things a whole hell of a lot worse. Look at New York, for Christ's sake. Taxation. Give small landlords a tax break, because they're getting nailed specifically on tax. Decrease regulations that aren't needed, and there's a lot of them out there. And that's really where landlords are kind of getting overly stressed by this. I would say don't vote for Sinn Féin, but I don't think that's really going to have much of an effect here, because they're probably going to get in the next election. And if you can, reform the RTB, because it's not fit for purpose. A lot of work needs to be done. But the likelihood it will be done is, I'm not sure. I'd say watch this space, because who knows what will happen.